Welcome to an edition of the Ratitude Podcast. It's been a little while since I've recorded. I've been busy doing some things and actually have a guest for today, but they must have had something to show up because they're not here. So I'm going to do a solo session. It's something I've been thinking about. I'm not sure that I'm totally prepared for it, but we're going to see how it goes. I think you're going to really like it, though. Over the last 3 weeks or so, I have had the opportunity to learn so many cool things just about myself and about why I am the way I am and where I need to go. If you're familiar with the Celestine prophecy, I think my life just kind of works that way. In fact, Mark Bentley, my mentor for Gene Keys, says he calls it the Ratitude prophecy. Just stuff seems to keep showing up in my life that is pointing me the direction that I need to go. And so I'm going with it. One of the things that showed up is this book. It's called Heal Your Wounds and Find Your True Self. It's by Lise Bourbeau. And actually, I reached out to see if Lise would be on my podcast. And I heard back from her staff that she's no longer doing that. She's up there in age. Thank you very much. And then I said, well, is there someone else that could do it? And they sent back a note saying, we'd love to, but all our instructors are French speaking. And I said, oh, well, maybe I should be your English speaking teacher. Not that I need another thing to teach, but it's really cool stuff. So this is going to be my introduction to talking about healing your wounds and finding your true self. And I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do it other than I might just read excerpts from this book because I've got it nicely highlighted. See that? And this is about your wounds. In the last few months, I've really run up against many of my wounds. And this book has really helped me to understand them and understand them in other people. And it says that, I'm just going to see how this goes. Before we are born, our inner God attracts our soul to the environment and to the family we need during this lifetime. We need in order to heal our wounds. And our souls choose our parents and the circumstances for our birth in very precise reasons. Isn't that kind of interesting? Over the last 4 days, I've been in this workshop called Seraphim Blueprint. And one of many key learnings there was rather than just being on a life journey, I'm on a soul journey. We're all on soul journeys. We might not recognize it. And that one of the purposes of our soul journey is to come here to heal our wounds. This says we all have the same mission to live our life experiences until we manage to accept them and discover and love ourselves through them. And not just love ourselves, but I think become love. And if you think about God, God is love. And it's creating a relationship closer to God or to love. And in order to do that, we've got to identify our wounds and work to get rid of them. So we can always count on our inner God to help us. He is omniscient, knows everything. Omnipresent, is everywhere, and omnipotent, all-powerful. This power is always present at work within us, guiding us to the people and situations we need to grow and evolve according to the life path that we choose. Isn't that fascinating? I mean, just that we are on a path that was meant for us, that we designed for us. When we do not accept ourselves or our experience, in other words, we continue to feel guilty, ashamed, afraid, judge ourselves in any way, or exhibit any other form of non-acceptance, we will continually attract other circumstances and people to make us relive that experience, the same experience. Some of us will not only live the same experience several times during our lives, but may also live it in another life. If you believe in that, and I'm coming to believe more and more in that. Accepting an experience doesn't mean it's our preference or that we agree with it. It rather means allowing ourselves to experiment and learn through the experience. There are consequences to everything we decide and don't decide, everything we do and don't do, everything we say and don't say, and even what we think and feel. As human beings, we want to learn and grow intellectually through life. That's kind of a hallmark of what I'm all about and what Ratitude's about. So when we realize that an experience can have harmful consequences, rather than blaming ourselves or others, we simply accept what we created, perhaps at a conscious or unconscious level, so that we could learn that it wasn't smart or beneficial experience and not one to be repeated. Why don't we understand it the first time around? Because our ego, that big old ego, supported by our beliefs, gets in the way. So in this work, you got to put the ego to the side and allow your inner God to come through. Only when our mental, emotional, physical bodies listen to our inner God will our soul be completely happy. So wouldn't that be a cool thing for our soul to be happy? In this book, what it describes is 5 different core wounds. And they say that they're in chronological order, and they're in order as they appear in life. And this is starting from like 2 or 3 years old. So the first wound is the wound of rejection. The second wound is abandonment. The third is humiliation. The fourth is betrayal. And the fifth is injustice. Now, what the author then says is each time we suffer or cause suffering because of these wounds, our whole being feels betrayed. We are not faithful to our inner God, to the needs of our being, because we let our ego, with its beliefs and fears, control our life. We create then masks to hide from ourselves and from others what we haven't wanted to solve. I think this is really, really huge. Now, this author calls it masks. Different people call it different things, but I'm going to go with this author, Lise. And so what she says is the mask to the wound of rejection is the withdrawer. Ha! That's what I've done. Like most of my life, I'm trying so hard to attack that one, to get rid of that one. I think I might find some answers, not just in this book, but through a hero's journey that I did with my spiritual guide, Grace, and then through the Seraphim blueprint. So these things are coming into my life because I've got to solve them now. The mask for abandonment is dependent. The mask for humiliation is a masochist. The mask for betrayal is a controller. And the mask for injustice is rigid. So the strength of the mask depends on the depth of the wound. So my rejection must be really deep because my withdrawer is really strong, unfortunately. A mask represents a person with a specific character type because numerous beliefs influence the attitude and behavior of the person are developed in each mask. The deeper the wound, the more we will suffer and the more we will wear a mask. We only wear our mask when we want to protect ourselves. So whether for yourself or a partner or whoever, kind of recognizing it that we're just trying to protect ourselves and it is not who we are. And as long as we're willing to work on it, that's a good thing. Now, if we don't want to work on it, that's a different thing. When we start looking with compassion at the part of the human that is suffering, events, situations, and people begin to transform themselves. So that's one of the things that I've been working on is sort of compassion, not just for people that trigger me and then my wound is activated and my mask comes out, but also compassion for self. And I think that that's an important thing to know and to recognize because we all really have them. It's the parent we liked best when we were teenagers with whom we have the most to solve. So think about that. Which parent did you like the best when you were a teenager? And what wounds did you see in them? Do you have them? Don't you find it reassuring to know that when someone else's behaviors bothers you or upsets you, it's a sign that they put on a mask to avoid suffering, that it's not really them? The masks that we created to protect ourselves are not permanent. That's an important thing to note. Because if you fall in love with someone, for example, and you get through the honeymoon phase and all of a sudden the wounds show up and the masks show up, it's not permanent. It can be changed as long as you choose to change. So let's go into the first wound here, the rejection. So that's the one that first shows up in your life. Rejection is a very deep wound because those who suffer from it feel that not only their whole human being, but also their right to exist is being rejected. It is the first of the 5 wounds to emerge, which means that it is present very early in life. The soul that comes back to earth to heal this wound will experience rejection from birth, and in several cases, even before. This one's me. This is one of my big wounds. Oftentimes, the wound of rejection is experienced with the parent of the same sex. The parent of the same sex teaches us how to love ourselves, and to give love. The parent of the opposite sex teaches us how to be loved and how to receive love. Not sure if I agree with that one, but that one's bolded in the book, so at least the author believes it true. Withdrawers believe that they are hopeless, worthless. That's why they will do everything possible to be perfect, so that in their eyes and the eyes of others, they have certain worthy or worthiness. And I think part of this is it's subconscious. We're not consciously saying, I'm not worthy, I'm hopeless. But in our subconscious, if you find yourself being rejected or you find yourself withdrawing, then you probably have this. Then deep down in your core wounds, you probably have some issues with worthiness. Although, quite truthfully, in my work as a hypnotherapist, I found that every single person does, including Tony Robbins, he'll admit it. It's interesting to see that it's generally the parent of the same sex who encourages the rejected child to flee. Around rejection, they often compare themselves to someone better and so believe they aren't as good as others. Loving is accepting the other person, even if we don't understand. So another characteristic of withdrawers is that they seek perfection in everything they do because they believe that if they make a mistake, they'll be judged. So for them, being judged equals rejected. That one rings true for me. As they don't believe in the perfection of their being, they make up for it by trying to reach perfection in what they do. They unfortunately confuse being with doing. Their need for protection can even become an obsession. They so much want everything they do to be perfect that each task takes longer than necessary. This, of course, attracts other situations where they'll be rejected. This is kind of interesting. When they're very frightened, withdrawers need sugar. When I was recently rejected, I went to the store to get, I used to love ice cream bars. And there's a new version of an ice cream bar called a Fat Boy. And they're kind of square. They're a little bit thicker, so they have more ice cream in it. So I bought a 6-pack of it. That's how many they come in the box. I brought it home. And I ate one. I go, oh, this is really good. This is helping me get over rejection. I didn't say that, but maybe that's my subconscious. So I ate another one. Oh, this is so good. That vanilla flavor with the outside chocolate is good. And I ate another, and I ate another, and I ate all 6 of them. That was kind of silly. If we are going through rejection, it's because we reject ourselves. Those who reject us in their lives are there to show us to what extent we reject ourselves. So this is an important point here that I didn't realize is that when we are feeling rejected by someone else, it's just a mirror that we're rejecting ourselves, that we need to do the work on ourselves. That's what I'm doing right now. It says cancer is mainly found in people who've suffered a lot and judged themselves. Cancer shows that they didn't allow their inner child to suffer. They can't accept that it's absolutely normal and human to resent the parent they thought responsible for their suffering. Isn't that interesting? You must remember that our inability to forgive ourselves for what we do to ourselves or for what we have done to others is the main reason for the presence of any wound. It's difficult to forgive ourselves because we don't even realize that we blame ourselves. We're blaming the other person, right? The greater the wound of rejection, the more you reject yourself, other people, situations, or projects. So I lined up with that. I don't know if you do or not. I'm asking you to think about, is rejection part of your wounding. And again, there's various levels. Let's go on to the second one. The second one is abandon. To abandon someone is to leave, to desert, or to no longer want to take care of that person. In a relationship, those who reject their partner push them away, no longer wanting them at their side. Those who abandon their partner leave. They go away to distance themselves temporarily or permanently. The wound inflicted with abandonment is more at the level of having and doing rather than in the level of being, as in the case of the wound rejection. Many people suffer from the wound of abandonment have declared that when they were young, their fathers or mothers, the parent of the opposite sex, didn't communicate with them. They found the parent too withdrawn. This one could apply to me too. The wound of abandonment is experienced with the parent of the opposite sex. People suffering from abandonment often suffer from rejection as well. I guess that could be me. When children were young, they felt rejected by their parent of the same sex and abandoned by the parent of the opposite sex. Because parents don't nurture their same-sex children, act this way because they reject themselves, and that's what the children feel deep down. So again, even our parents, they have their wounds that they're just passing on to us, and it has to stop in some generation. Wouldn't it be great if it would stop with you, with me? That's what I'm trying to do. You'll realize that most people have several wounds. And quite truthfully, as I read this book, I go, I got all 5 of them. That's not really funny, but it gives me a lot of stuff to work on. Those who suffer from abandonment don't feel sufficiently nourished with infection. The mask that we create to hide this wound is a dependent mask. The posture of the dependent will be often more slumped. Sometimes I slump. Not sometimes, I slump a lot. Out of the 5 wounds mentioned in this book, dependents are most apt to become victims. When it seems they're doing everything possible to attract attention, they are in fact trying to feel important in order to receive support. Whether or not they find it difficult to make decisions by themselves, dependents will generally ask for the opinion or the approval of others before deciding. They need to feel supported in their decisions. When they feel supported, they feel loved. When dependents do something for someone else, they expect affection in return. When they receive the desired affection while doing something pleasant with that person, they want it to last. The end of something pleasant is experienced, of course, as abandonment. Solitude is the greatest fear for dependents. So dependent people are the most able to remain oblivious to the problems in the relationship. If the partner says they want to leave, dependents suffer tremendously because having been oblivious to their problems, they didn't expect that decision. So it's best that you learn how to support yourself. How's this going? I hope good. The most intense emotion that dependents feel is sadness. They feel this sadness because deep inside they're unable to understand or explain where it comes from. They can, however, go to the other extreme and withdraw from or leave the person or the situation that makes them feel sad or lonely. They don't realize that each time they leave someone or something, they in turn are abandoning. Dependents are also frightened of all forms of authority. They find authoritarians indifferent and cold. They even accuse God of abandoning them and feel that they have good reason to do so. They don't realize how many half-finished projects they abandon. They like going to certain places alone when they choose to, but they would feel abandoned and deserted if the partner did the same. When in a couple, dependents lean on their partner or touch or frequently hold hands. Even when they're sitting, they find it difficult to stay upright. They lean on an arm, the chair of the lounge. In cases, they find it hard to stand straight. The 2 great fears that haunt them are the fear of death and the fear of madness. They may fear insanity because their intense mental activity dare speak to others about this. They don't want to be judged as mad. If you're too open to other people's emotions when you were young and you felt responsible for their happiness or unhappiness, you have become very psycho. It's very common for dependents to believe that they're independent and they enjoy telling others how independent they are. This, however, only hides the wound of abandonment and accentuates it all the more because it isn't being healed. Of the 5 types, I'd say that the person with the wound of abandonment is the one who likes sex the most. Interesting. Dependents who are victims often suffer from hysteria. I've noticed that dependents can have rare diseases or so-called incurable diseases, the ISIS. If you recognize yourself as suffering from this wound of abandonment, I'd like to remind you that this wound is reactivated by your parent of the opposite sex and continues to be reactivated by any other person of the opposite sex. Wow. As long as we continue resenting a parent, even if it's unconsciously, our relationship with other people of the same sex as that parent will be difficult. The same wounds are repeated from generation to generation. This will last as long as we don't stop the wheel of karma. The only way to do that is through real love and forgiveness. Remember, the main cause of a wound is the inability to forgive ourselves for what we do to ourselves or to others. It's difficult to forgive ourselves because generally we can't even see our own self-resentment. The deeper the wound of abandonment, the more we abandon ourselves. We blame others for what we do ourselves but don't want to see. That's why we attract people around us to show what we do to others or to ourselves. We're attracting this. It's a message. It's that Celestine prophecy thing. We are attracting this into our lives so our soul can remove it, heal it permanently so that generations don't get it. Therefore, it's important and urgent to solve everything with our parents because that's how we'll stop reproducing the same situations. All right, let's move on to the third one, which is humiliation. The word humiliation is defined as the lowering of one's pride, dignity, or self-respect. Synonyms for this word are embarrassing, mortification, shame, indignity, degradation, abasement. The wound is awakened when a child feels that one of his parents is ashamed of him or her, or she feels that they have been ashamed of if they are dirty, if they just make a mess, especially in public or with family, or he's badly dressed. The parent can unknowingly, because most of this is unknowingly if you got good parents, they tried their best. It unknowingly happens, but to a little 2-year-old, 3-year-old, it's humiliating. Yeah, this is a funny one. The child happens to see one of their parents naked and feel that the parents are ill at ease or want to hide. They'll learn that you should be ashamed of your body. Isn't that interesting? Children feel put down if they feel a parent is controlling them, if they feel they have no freedom to act or move as they like to on a physical level. The wound of humiliation is often most experienced with the mother. Most of the time, masochists, so that's the mask, are not aware that they seek pain and humiliation. They manage to punish themselves before someone else does it for them. The person suffering from the wound of humiliation feels shame more often than others. The difference between shame and guilt, we feel guilty when we judge what we have or haven't done as bad. When we consider that we are being bad, we feel shame. So it has to do with character. Each time masochists seem to want to do things for others, they are in fact creating constraints and obligations for themselves. They feel they won't make others ashamed of them while they are helping them, but very often they feel humiliated at letting others take advantage of them. They are also rarely appreciated for what they do. I've heard several masochist women say they're fed up with being a slave. Masochists don't realize that by doing everything for others, they make others feel that they couldn't manage alone, thus humiliating themselves, thus perpetuating this wound. When masochists manage to feel deeply how special and important they are, they will no longer need to prove it to others. If they acknowledge themselves, their bodies will no longer need to take up so much space. A masochist mother will, for example, want to control the way her children and her partner dress, their appearance, and cleanliness. This mother even wants her very young children to stay clean, and if she doesn't succeed, she'll feel ashamed as a mother. Masochists find it hard to express their real needs or feelings because since childhood, they've never dared speak for the fear of being ashamed or making someone else feel ashamed. Masochist parents often told them that what went on in the home didn't concern others, so they weren't to speak about it. They had to keep everything for themselves. Shameful situations or family members had to be kept secret. Masochists are generally oversensitive and they hurt easily. They therefore do everything possible not to hurt others. As soon as someone, especially someone they care for, feels unhappy, they feel responsible. They think they should have said or not said or done or not done something. They don't realize that being so tuned into the moods of others, they don't listen to their own needs. They make themselves suffer by not listening to their needs, which feeds their wound of humiliation and their masochist mask. They do everything to make themselves useful. It's a way for them to hide their wound and to make themselves believe they don't suffer from humiliation. Masochists feel humiliated and put down at even the slightest criticism. It's important to remember that others can never make us feel guilty because guilty can only come from inside of us. Masochists often feel powerless with those they love and those close to them. When they are blamed, an attitude they attract in spite of themselves, they remain speechless, not knowing what to say to defend themselves. They blame themselves and can suffer so much that they leave the situation. They then try to justify and explain their behavior to bring back peace. When masochists feel free and that no one is trying to hinder them, they have fun and live life to the fullest. They have no limits. Masochists do everything they can to avoid being labeled as someone who takes advantage of other people. That's why it's important to remember that it's not what you experience that makes you suffer, but your reaction to what you experience, which is caused by your unhealed wounds. We need to heal those wounds, people. Masochists are often disgustists. They frequently create situations where they'll feel disgust toward themselves or others. In these situations, their first reaction is to reject those who disgust us. They will do anything to remain oblivious to their own suffering because they're too frightened of feeling that pain that is associated with that wound. Masochists will do this by trying to be worthy at all costs. They're too ashamed to show what they like and too ashamed to make sounds, for example, that would show how much they enjoy certain things. Oh, this is interesting. Their inability to listen to their own needs often provokes itchy skin. I've been itching a lot lately. I must have this one too. Oh, unfortunately, masochists tend to reward themselves with food. Maybe those ice cream sandwiches I had. It's important to realize that your mother or father also suffered the wound of humiliation. By feeling compassion for your parent, it will be easier for you to feel compassion for yourself. Remember that the main cause of a wound comes from our inability to forgive ourselves for what we do to ourselves or what we've done to others. It's difficult for us to forgive ourselves because most of the time we aren't even aware that we accuse ourselves. The deeper the wound, the more we humiliate ourselves by putting ourselves down, comparing ourselves to others, or we humiliate others by being ashamed of them or doing too much for them. We blame others for everything we do ourselves but don't want to see. That's why we attract people to show us what we are doing. The masochist mask appears to be the most difficult to recognize and to admit to. Shoot, I'm admitting to this one too. All right, let's move on to the fourth one, betrayal. To betray is to stop being faithful to someone or to a cause, or to abandon or to denounce. Faithfulness, which is the opposite of betrayal. We can trust a faithful person. When that trust is broken, we may feel betrayed. This wound is experienced with the parent of the opposite sex. Think about that. They will tend to compare their partner with the parent of the opposite sex or will expect too much for their partner, hoping to receive what they didn't receive from that parent. The soul that incarnates to heal the wound of betrayer chooses parents that are fairly self-centered and who charm their children. Children feel betrayed by their parent of the opposite sex each time that parent makes a promise that isn't kept, each time that parent betrays a trust. Has that ever happened to you? Okay, I got this one too. Children experience betrayal each time they sense that their parent of the same sex feels betrayed by the other parent. They feel this betrayal as strongly as if it happened to them. When children begin to experience betrayal, they create the controller mask to protect themselves. Controllers control to make sure they keep their promises are faithful and responsible, and to make sure other people of the opposite sex keeps their commitments. Controllers create a body for themselves that radiates strength and power and seems to say, I'm responsible, you can trust me. So for you out there that are controllers, when controllers look at a person, they have gift of making them feel special, important. They see everything quickly. Remember that when we have only a few of the characteristics mentioned is because the wound is not so deep. So you're thinking about these 5 wounds. Some are going to apply and some of them aren't going to apply. The ones that apply more are the deeper wound. The ones that apply less are lesser wounds. I'm guessing that we have all of these wounds. Maybe there's some special people out there that don't, or maybe you can't see them. And that's the purpose of this podcast, is for you to just think about what your wounds are. Most people I know that I run around circles with all think that they've healed their wounds because they've done so many things, including me. Except that I think it's a lifelong journey. We all have wounds. We all can be working on them. If you get triggered by anything, you have a wound. Strength is a characteristic that is common to all people suffering from the wound of betrayal, as they find it hard to accept any form of betrayal, whether it's on their part or on the part of others. They do everything possible to be responsible, strong, special, and important to satisfy their ego. There's that ego coming up again that prevents them from seeing how many times a week they betray themselves or others. Betrayal is so unacceptable to them that they can't believe that they could be capable of such a thing. If they are aware that they have betrayed someone or breaking a promise, for example, they find all sorts of excuses and maybe even lie to get out of it. For example, if they forget to do something, they'll swear that they had thought about it, and they will have an excuse for not having done it. Remember that each of our wounds exists to remind us that if others make us suffer, it's because we do the same things to ourselves and to others. The ego can neither understand nor accept this. If you see yourself as having the controller mask and you feel resistance when reading this or hearing this, it's your ego that's resisting, not your heart. Of the 5 masks, controllers are those who expect the most of others because they like to be able to plan everything, thus being able to control. Controllers want to make sure that others do what they're supposed to do to be trustworthy. Controllers have strong personalities. They say what they believe with conviction and expect others to adhere to their beliefs. They quickly form their opinions of people or situations and are convinced they are right. They express their opinion categorically and want to convince others at all cost. They believe that when the other person understands them, it means that they agree. But this, unfortunately, is not always the case. All the masks have one point in common. We don't realize that when we're wearing one, those around us, on the other hand, see the mask that we are wearing a lot more easily. We don't see it. I know people that it looks to me like they're controllers that don't see it at all. Controllers are very talented and act fast. They therefore have little patience with people who are slower. For example, following a slow driver often gets on their nerves and makes them angry. I do that all the time. When things don't go fast enough, especially when they're bothered by something they hadn't planned for, they get angry. When things don't go as they would like, controllers are easily can become aggressive, even though they don't see themselves as such. They see themselves as assertive, strong, and refusing to be walked over. Of the 5 characters, controllers are those who have the most ups and downs. One minute they could be full of love, and the next minute they could be angry for no apparent reason. Family and friends don't know where they stand. They often feel betrayed by this volatile attitude. Wow. Oh, I want to read this one because I do this. Controllers like arriving early so they can control everything. They don't like being late and don't tolerate others arriving late, even though it gives them the opportunity to want to change and control these people. You know that I set my watch 7 minutes ahead, so I'll always be on time. Oh, well. Controllers consider themselves to be hard workers and responsible, and so have problems with laziness. Seeing others, especially of the opposite sex, doing nothing really gets on their nerves. Also make sure everyone knows everything they've done, how much they've done, how they did it. The others will see how responsible and trustworthy they are. Controllers hate not being trusted. They consider themselves to be so responsible and talented that others would naturally trust them. What they don't see, however, is how hard it is for them to trust others. Controllers generally like to have the last word. That's why they always find something to add everything on nearly everything. Controllers are very sensitive, but their sensitivity doesn't show through because they're too busy showing their strength. Controllers' egos easily get the upper hand when someone corrects them what they are doing because they don't like being watched, especially not by another controller. They like to appear brave, courageous, and strong as often as possible. They don't like surprises. They prefer being prepared for every possibility and want to have time to imagine every option so that they'll be ready. Controllers are quick to call others hypocrites because they are so distrustful. On the other hand, they could often be thought of as hypocrites for the way they manipulate others. They don't realize that at times they too are hypocrites. Controllers hate being lied to. They say, I'd rather be hit than lied to. They frequently lie themselves. In their eyes, they're not really lying. They can easily find good reasons for bending the truth. They think their lies, which are generally subtle, are necessary for them to get their way or justify themselves. Unfortunately, they can't always keep their words because they commit themselves without checking to see if they'll be able to make their commitments. Controllers' reputations are very important to them. If someone says or does anything that could affect their good reputation, they feel insulted and angry because they feel they have been horribly betrayed. Controllers believe they're strong because they control others, but in fact, that's another form of dependency. When two controllers live together, it's a relationship based on power struggles. Many of us who suffer the wound of betrayal have felt the parent of the opposite sex didn't keep their commitments and live up to the child's expectations for an ideal, strong parent. Isn't this interesting stuff, though? The majority of controllers develop the wound of abandonment before developing the wound of betrayal. So if you have abandonment and betrayal, that's what this book says. Controllers are generally born leaders and like being in charge of others. They don't want to stop controlling because they believe that if they do, they will no longer be in charge. In fact, the opposite is true. When controllers stop controlling and content themselves with managing, they become much better bosses. There's a big difference between controlling and manages. When we control, we do so by using the influence of fear. To manage is to give direction without necessarily wanting things to get done our way. We can be managers and still learn things from our subordinates. Okay, so that's a lot about that one. I'm going to go on to the fifth one, which is injustice. For the wound of injustice, we suffer from injustice when we feel we aren't appreciated at our core value, when we don't feel respected, or when we don't believe we receive what we deserve. As children, we find it unjust that we can't integrate our individuality, we can't express ourselves, and we can't be ourselves. We experience this wound primarily with our parent of the same sex. If that parent is unable to feel and to express their feelings, we suffer from that parent's coldness. We can also suffer from our parents' frequent criticisms, strictness, intolerance of their conformism. So that the mass becomes rigid. Rigid people are very sensitive, but they develop the capacity to bury their sensitivity and hide it for others. They act as if nothing touches them. Those who suffer from both rejection and injustice generally only wear black or very dark colors. That's not me. I wear colorful colors. Rigid people seek justice and fairness above all. They are perfectionists, believing if what they say or do is perfect, they'll automatically be just. They are often lively, dynamic people. Even when young, rigid people realize that they are more appreciated for what they do than for what they are. Even if this isn't true, they're convinced it is. That's why they become good performers and start managing on their own fast. Rigid people are optimistic, often too much so. They believe that by saying no problem, problems will go away. As they're always seeking justice, rigid people want to be sure that they deserve what they're receiving. They regularly use the words always, never, and very. Rigid people have a great fear of making mistakes. Rigid people are very demanding of themselves in most areas of life. They prefer to do everything themselves so that they will be perfect. You can see the greatest injustice rigid people commit is toward themselves. They can easily blame themselves for lots of things. Rigid people like everything to be tidy. They don't like having to look at things. Some even can become obsessed with their need for everything to be perfectly tidy. The most common emotion felt by rigid people is anger, especially toward themselves. When they're angry, however, their first reaction is to attack someone else. They are, in fact, angry with themselves when they don't do the right thing. I find this just so fascinating. There's a lot more. I didn't highlight as much on that one, I guess because that was less me. So now the last chapter is about, okay, now you figured out your wound, what do you do about it? And this is one place where I'm not sure that the book really helped me enough, but it's that the first step, the very first step is the most important step, is to realize that you have it. Because the ego does everything to prevent us from seeing our wounds. That's a big old ego. The ego always believes it's taking the easiest path, but in fact, it's complicating our lives. When intelligence governs our lives, it is at first difficult because we have to make an effort, but in the end, it simplifies our lives tremendously. The longer we wait to heal our wounds, the deeper they become. Each time we go through a situation that awakens and touches a wound, we add another layer. So today, start right now by saying, okay, that made sense to me. That's a wound. I'm going to take a look at that. I'm going to go do something about it. Don't know what it is right now, but stuff is going to show up in my life that's going to help me address this, because I just believe that to be true. The more these wounds hurt us, the more is normal and human to resent the parent we believe to be responsible for having made us suffer. Later, we transfer this resentment or this hatred onto people of the same sex as the parent we accuse of having hurt us. Dang. There are no bad people in this world. There are only people who suffer. The ability to feel compassion is one of the advantages of being conscious of our own wounds and those of others. Souls that come to earth to heal the wound of betrayal will be looking for a strong, solid parent. Okay, so now it goes on to say, you're coming to earth. What are you going to do? I'm going to stop at that point and just talk about just a couple other things, because there's 4 steps in this book. They're not obvious to me. Read the book. Here it is again. Heal Your Wounds and Find Your True Self by Lise Bourbeau. Highly recommend it. It's an easy read. It's only about less than 200 pages. You can read it really fast. I encourage you to highlight the things that you think, oh, I've seen that in me before. Not in your partner, in you. In you. This is about you. But there's a lot of different processes out there, and you can find the right process for you, but just do it. So there's a lot of processes around there, from the Hoffman process, from Tantra, that involve bashing, pillow bashing. And I've got my pillow over there for bashing. But I did this soul's journey here in Naples with Grace Barr, and she had an interesting process. And we partnered up with someone. We had 3 stones. And we went off into this beautiful property where the retreat was being held, and we shared with our partner, someone that we didn't know, what our 3 major wounds were. And then we blew it into the stone. And then after we were done with sharing, each person went off on their own in this beautiful place, and you buried your wound. And you buried it. I buried it. I stomped on it. You have a little ceremony on it. You put it to bed. That's another process to use. During the Seraphim blueprint, there was another process. And to me, it was the most powerful of the processes. What I want to say, though, is recognizing that you have wounds is the important step here. Building compassion for yourself around that. Building compassion for your parents around that. And previous generations is an important part of that. I think that there's a next step, though, is that beyond forgiveness and compassion, and I learned this weekend, and I think I've learned this in a beautiful way, is that when your wounds show up, when they show up, it's really a gift. And you have to really think about that, because it's taken me a while to figure this out, that it's such a gift to have that wound show up in your life, because it's an opportunity to heal it. And so moving from the wound, the trigger, the mask, recognizing it, develop compassion around, and then becoming grateful for that. I think those are important steps for each and every one of us to fulfill part of our soul's mission here on earth in this lifetime, to discover what your wounds are and to eradicate them, to lessen them, to work on them, because it may just be a lifetime of work. But that's what I believe. Sorry I didn't have that all memorized. I read from this beautiful book that showed up in my Celestine prophecy, synchronicity kind of life. It's been hugely impactful. I'm working on all these wounds. I'm burying them. I'm bashing them. I'm grateful for them. And I hope that you take this opportunity to find yours and move to a place where you become even more loving, getting back to the love of God, because that's what God is love and loving divinely. So with that, out for now. Have a gratitude day.